detained in the Assad jails.
When did you realize that your job had changed? And were there many, many more bodies that you were photographing on a regular basis than before the revolution?
There were small numbers at first, at the beginning of the revolution. We would take in a day 10 to 20 people, sometimes 5 to 10 bodies that we would get daily. But as the revolution went on, at the beginning of 2012, for example, the number started going up in a very marked way. We started taking photos of 20, then 30, until it came to a point where we were taking like 50 or more bodies every day by 2013, for example.
Caesar, we're seeing really horrible pictures. We have them projected on our wall here. These are the pictures that you smuggled out. What were the causes of death that you were recording?
Most of the bodies that we were taking photos of were of people that, by the way, were peaceful people. These are some of the people that just took part of the protests in Damascus and in Daraa, calling for freedom. There was signs of sometimes them being shot, and you can see many wounds in their heads, in their bodies, in their arms. We began to take photographs of bodies that had all these signs of all types of torture, of starvation for long periods of time, and there would be a doctor, and there would be a photographer, and there would be people from the security forces with us to go body by body, and we would number them based on the number that they were murdered in.
Caesar, did you ever dare ask your superiors what was going on?
Who doesn't live in Syria doesn't understand the situation of how much fear that existed within us. Even the pathologist had a high level, a high rank, but he was terrified of the intelligence. The intelligence officers that were with us, it was terrifying. It was not allowed for us to ask any question.
You were doing this for 2 years. What impact did it have on you personally?
I was horrified. I was terrified every day of the job that I was doing. I would look at the different horrendous ways that these individuals were slaughtered and tortured to death. The only crime they had was that they called for their own dignity and for their own freedom. And then I would picture my own self on the faces of these bodies and worry about my family being in their place. And many times I saw people that I knew personally, but because of the horrendous torture that they happened to them, it was hard for me to recognize them. The types of torture were the worst that I've ever seen. Very bloodthirsty regime.
And Caesar had been, of course, testifying before Congress. And anybody who wants to understand why there was this civil war, why there was a revolution that deposed Assad in the end, only has to listen to him and only has to look at those photos. And for years, the United Nations tried in vain to stop all the bloodshed of the civil war. But now Assad is gone. He's escaped the fate of Muammar Gaddafi. He's gone to safety. The next hours and days are critical. The United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, says it is a watershed moment in Syria's history, and he's joining me now from Geneva. Geir Pedersen, I know you were listening to that. I just want to ask you to comment on, is it any wonder there was a revolution? Is there any wonder that people rose up against this kind of barbarism, really? What's your feeling?
No, frankly speaking, we know this from, of course, 2011, 2012, 2013. This is when it started, when the Syrian people rose up and demanded justice, peace, and democracy. And of course, what you have just shown, and it just proves that the enormous suffering that people have been going through. You know, the more than 100,000 people that are still missing, maybe hopefully many of them have not been able to come out of the prisons. But I'm afraid that there are still people we don't know where are, and that are still missing. And, you know, we all, I think, are filled with grief that this was actually possible to happen. And of course, it's a day of celebration and joy for those who have managed to get out. And we mourn those who have lost their lives and suffered during all those years.
You've been looking at this file for a long, long time, the Syria issue.